What if every choice in your relationship wasn't really a choice at all because the answer was already decided for you? What if every disagreement ended before it began because one voice was always positioned as wiser, stronger, or more deserving? In abusive relationships, this particular dynamic doesn't always arrive as shouting or commands. It comes a little bit more quieter than that. It's a roll of the eyes when you speak or voice your opinion, a dismissive tone that tells you your views do not matter, or a sigh that signals you should just drop it. You might sit down at the table and hear, "You're the man, you should pay." You raise an idea about the future and you're met with, "You don't understand how hard it is for women, you don't understand how the world works." Or you try to explain a concern and you hear, "I know best, just leave it to me." At first, it sounds a little bit like fairness, sometimes like tradition, sometimes like practicality. But little by little, partnership is replaced with hierarchy. Their needs come first, their judgment is final. Your role becomes carrying, absorbing, and providing, while theirs becomes deciding. That's what happens when entitlement takes hold. It doesn't announce itself with a fight. It seeps in with assumptions that their needs matter more, that their voice carries more weight, that your presence exists only to serve. Entitlement in an abusive relationship is the belief that one person's voice, needs, and authority naturally outranks the others. It is not presented as a discussion. It is not offered as an idea to be weighed. It is positioned as fact. The ground rules of the relationship are that you are expected to follow. This entitlement shows up in many forms. Sometimes it's spoken openly. "I'm the mother, so I get to decide." "You're the man, that's your job." "I know best, you do not understand." Other times it's quieter. An eye roll when you speak, a sigh when you hold a boundary, a dismissive tone that shuts down your point before it's even finished. The message is always the same. Their preferences are more important. Their perspective is more accurate. Their needs must come first. Your role is to adapt, absorb, and accommodate. Their role is to set the agenda and hold the authority. For men, this entitlement often draws on cultural scripts. You may hear that as the man, you are meant to carry the weight without complaint, that your role is provider, protector, and fixer, while her role is to receive and direct. In other dynamics, feminist language may be weaponized. "You don't know what it's like for a woman. I shouldn't have to do that. It's your responsibility." The effect is the same. Your experience is dismissed as ignorance, selfishness, or privilege, while hers is elevated as unquestionable authority. This tactic in an abusive relationship is insidious because it doesn't look like a fight for power, it looks like the natural order of things. Entitlement is framed as duty, as fairness, as what any good man would accept without protest. And because the language echoes cultural expectations, it's easy to mistake it for normality until you realize your voice has disappeared. At its core, entitlement is not about partnership, it's about hierarchy. It places one person above the other, not through merit or contribution, but through assumption. It turns decisions into decrees. It trains you to measure your worth by how well you serve, and it punishes you the moment you expect reciprocity. The underlying message is simple and relentless: I am better, I decide, you exist to meet my needs. In this episode of the Blueprint of Family Violence Against Men, we're going to explore what entitlement looks like within an abusive relationship and why it matters. We'll also look through 6 very specific ways that it shows up. First is entitlement by relationship role, when roles like man or mother are used for automatic authority. Second is asymmetric equality, when equality is spoken about, but only one person benefits from that framing while the other carries everything. Third is cognitive superiority, when your perspective is constantly dismissed under the false claim that they are smarter, more rational, or more informed. Fourth is cultural and class superiority, when their background, hardship, or upbringing are weaponized to dequalify your voice. Fifth is moral superiority, when control is cloaked in ethical language, framing their preferences as the right way to live. And sixth is victimhood superiority, when past pain is leveraged to justify control and to silence your own needs. After all that, we'll have a look at how entitlement lands uniquely for men, how cultural expectations and double standards make this tactic especially confusing and hard to name. Then I'll share some tools on how you can protect yourself, spot the patterns, and hold on to your sense of worth even when your voice is being raised. If this episode resonates, please hit like, comment, and subscribe. Not just for me, but because every click helps bring visibility to male victims of abuse. And your support might put this video in front of someone who needs it right now. Let's now take a look at the specific ways entitlement shows up. The first is entitlement by relationship role. This is when superiority is claimed automatically, not through discussion. The authority is tied to a form of identity, such as who they are or who they say you are. It's not about fairness, it's about hierarchy. The words sound all too familiar. You are the man, you should be paying for that. That's your job, you're supposed to take care of me. These are not requests, they're expectations. Your role is set as the one who provides, carries, and absorbs. Theirs is set as the one who directs, decides, and exempts themselves from equal effort. At first, it may sound like tradition or care. You might think, this is what a good man does. He steps up, he provides, he doesn't complain. And because culture already places men under the weight of being provider and protector, these statements feel familiar. They echo expectations you have already internalized. But slowly, the trap in an abusive relationship becomes clear. Each time you meet the demand, the bar is raised. Cover the bills once, and it becomes permanent. Take on stress without complaint, and it becomes your identity. The moment you hesitate, the labels arrive. You're weak, you're selfish, you're uncaring. Resistance is reframed as failure. It shows up everywhere. You set a boundary and you're told, you're supposed to support me no matter what. You ask for help with the house, and the response is, that's not my role. You reach for balance, and instead you are reminded of duty. The emotional cost is sharp. You start to measure yourself against an impossible standard. You feel guilty for saying no. You feel ashamed for needing rest. You learn to silence your own needs before they even surface because they will only be turned back on you. This is not partnership, it's role based control. Your identity is reduced to service, the one who pays, fixes, and carries, while theirs expands into authority and exemption. In time, you stop seeing the imbalance because you are consumed with surviving the expectation. This is how entitlement by relationship role functions. It claims authority through identity. It defines your worth by what you give, and it declares without discussion that one person is entitled to more simply because of who they are. Next is asymmetric equality. Asymmetric equality is when the language of fairness is used to disguise an imbalance. The words might sound progressive, but the reality is a hierarchy. In this pattern, responsibility is rejected, but the entitlement remains. The abuser refuses the roles they don't like, but insist you must keep yours. They won't contribute equally, but they demand the benefits of equality, plus the traditional advantages they've decided to hold on to. It often shows up in the smallest, most everyday moments. You ask them to clean up the mess that they had just made, and you are accused of being controlling. You hear, what is this? The 1950s? Do not tell me to clean up. You ask for help with the kids, and you hear, that's not my job. Stop trying to dump things on me. Yet when the bills come due, when the car breaks down, when the emotional load gets heavy, it's simply assumed that you will handle it. The imbalance is protected by accusations. If you press for fairness, you are told you are old fashioned, rigid, or even misogynistic. If you hesitate to meet a demand, you're labeled as selfish. The tactic silences you not with logic, but with shame. For men who genuinely value equality, this lands especially hard. You may believe in partnership, in listening, in doing your share, and those beliefs get weaponized against you. Every time you carry more, it proves you should always carry more. Every time you ask for balance, it's reframed as proof that you are the problem with today's society. And the damage is not just practical, it's psychological. You begin to question your own sense of fairness and equity. You wonder if maybe you are unreasonable for expecting a contribution or expecting help. You bite your tongue when you see the imbalance because raising it always explodes in conflict and accusations. Slowly, you learn the safest path is silence, and silence cements that hierarchy in place. That's what makes asymmetric equality so corrosive. It takes the language of progress and uses it as an armor for exploitation. You end up carrying everything, the work, the stress, the guilt, while being told you're privileged simply for noticing. Next is cognitive superiority. Cognitive superiority is when a partner claims permanent ownership of being right. This is not about accuracy. It's not about who has the better idea. It's about hierarchy. Their voice is positioned as fact and yours as flawed, no matter what you say. You can be correct, knowledgeable, even the expert in the room. It does not matter. The response is always the same. You don't understand. That's not how it works. Your thinking is flawed. This is the trap. Truth is irrelevant. The goal is not discussion. The goal is to train you to doubt yourself. It often shows up as long lectures, corrections, or sarcastic commentary. You offer a perspective, and suddenly you're being educated about why you are wrong. You try to clarify, and you're told you're emotional, irrational, or too simple to see it. In time, even straightforward conversations feel like tests you're destined to fail. The cruelty is that it doesn't matter if you're right. Even when facts back you, the tactic reframes them as incomplete, naive, or misguided. The message is constant. You don't get it, but I do. The impact runs deep. You start to hesitate before speaking, you edit your own thoughts, scanning them for flaws before they leave your mouth. Even when you are confident, you still brace for the correction that will come. And slowly, your trust in your own judgment erodes. This is not about intelligence. This is about control. By keeping you in the role of the one who just does not understand, they place themselves as the permanent authority. And once that idea takes hold, you no longer feel free to contribute, to decide, or even think without second guessing. This is cognitive superiority. It doesn't care about the truth, it cares about dominance, using intellect not as a bridge, but as a cage that shrinks your confidence until silence feels safer than speaking. Next is cultural or class superiority. Cultural or class superiority is when background or upbringing is turned into a tool of control. The abuser presents their history as a badge of authority and uses it to dismiss or disqualify your perspective. The interesting thing here is their story doesn't matter. It can be one of hardship, privilege, or really anything in between. If they grew up poor, that hardship is used as proof that your middle class experience makes you naive. If they grew up wealthy, that status is used as proof that your background makes you uncultured or unworthy. No matter what you bring, it is still recast as inadequate. You'll often hear things like, you wouldn't last a day where I grew up, or you had it easy, so you just don't understand. You don't know how people like me think. The tactic doesn't engage with what you're saying, it invalidates you for who you are. Even when you do speak from experience or expertise, you are shut down with the reminder that your background disqualifies you. The effect is a silencing. You stop offering input, not because you lack knowledge, but because you know it will be dismissed on sight. You start to believe that your instincts carry no weight. Decisions get made without your voice, because your voice has been recast as illegitimate. The tactic is not about class, wealth, or culture. It's about hierarchy. By elevating their background and degrading yours, they create permanent authority. And when that authority is accepted, the relationship stops being a partnership. It becomes a system where one person claims the right to decide and the other is conditioned to defer because of their background. Next is moral superiority. Moral superiority is when a partner claims authority by presenting themselves as the guardian of what is right. It's not about genuine ethics, it's about control through distortion. Even if you act with integrity and live by strong values, you're recast as selfish or ignorant or careless because that framing gives them power. This tactic doesn't even require consistency. They will pull from whatever idea or belief suits the moment. It can be health, politics, sustainability, parenting, charity, or even spirituality. Sometimes they don't even live by the standards they demand. That doesn't matter. What matters is that they can claim the moral high ground long enough to put you in the wrong. It shows up in the smallest choices. You bring home takeaway after a long day and you hear, that food is full of chemicals. How could you feed that to the family? You buy yourself something modest and it becomes, that's irresponsible. When there are people out there who are starving, you suggest an approach to parenting and it's met with, that's harmful. I could never raise my children that way. Even neutral differences are reframed as moral failures. Wanting a steak becomes cruelty. Playing a game to relax becomes negligence. Buying a new shirt becomes consumerist selfishness. And if you point out that they themselves don't live by the same rules, the goalposts move. I deserve this after everything I have been through. This is especially disorientating for men who genuinely want to act with integrity. You're not arguing for dominance, you're trying to live thoughtfully and fairly. But every disagreement becomes an accusation that you don't care, that you lack conscience, that you are fundamentally less good. The impact is corrosive. You know your values, you know you act with care, but when every choice is reframed as proof of your moral failure, you begin to doubt yourself. You wonder if you really are careless, ignorant, or selfish. You start second guessing ordinary decisions like what you eat, what you buy, how you spend your time, as though each one is a test of your character. That doubt is the point. By making you distrust your own sense of right and wrong, they condition you to defer to theirs. Slowly, your own moral compass is dismantled and replaced with theirs. And when that happens, control is complete. You are no longer just deferring in decisions, you're deferring in identity, believing they are the only one who knows what good really is. Moral superiority isn't about conscience, it's about capture. It twists values into weapons, turns integrity into shame, and leaves you dependent on the very person who is undermining you. The last is victimhood superiority. The name itself is a contradiction. Victimhood should never create superiority. Real suffering deserves compassion, not dominance, but in an abusive dynamic, victimhood can be weaponized. Pain becomes a form of leverage used to silence, to control, and to ensure that one person's needs are always unquestioned, while yours are erased. Victimhood superiority happens when past trauma is turned into authority. It is not raised to heal or to invite understanding, it's raised to win. Every conflict, every boundary, every request you make is quickly redirected back to their suffering. Their story of pain becomes the trump card that ends the discussion before it can ever begin. The ways it shows up can sound almost innocent at first. You ask for help with the housework, and the response is, I already went through so much as a child, I shouldn't have to do this too. You say you're exhausted from work, and you might hear, you have no idea how hard my life has been. You're lucky you even get to work. You try to talk about your own hurt and pain, and it's overridden with, "That's nothing compared to what I have been through." Sometimes the past itself can be small, but it'll be retold until it fills the room. A single tiny difficult memory from their family becomes the entire reason you can't be trusted. A story about a cruel ex is used to justify constant suspicion of you. Even day to day frustrations are still linked back to their trauma, so that everything you do is measured against wounds you didn't cause and can never repair. The tactic works because it is so destabilizing. As the partner, you know the story, you've heard the pain, and you want to respond with compassion. But when every issue is reframed through that lens, you stop being an equal in a relationship. You become a caretaker of their past, forced to surrender your present. For the man on the receiving end, this creates an almost impossible moral bind. If you grew up with integrity, if you were raised to protect and support those who have suffered, your instinct is to help. You want to give care, you want to make things better. So when victimhood is presented to you, you step back, defer, and carry more than your share because not helping feels unthinkable. But underneath that instinct sits unease. Part of you recognizes that your compassion is being exploited. You see that the story is being used as a shield to avoid accountability or as a weapon to gain control. Yet if you push back, you risk being cast as heartless, the man who doesn't care about a victim. That fear traps you. You choose silence over conflict, self denial over accusation, because the cost of being labeled cruel feels heavier than the burden of being erased. The long term impact is devastating. When victimhood is used this way again and again, it begins to corrupt one of the highest values, your instinct to help. You start to associate vulnerability with manipulation. You stop trusting stories of pain because you've been trained to expect that behind them lies control. And that shift doesn't just scar the relationship, it scars you. It can take years to recognize this tactic for what it is. And when you finally do, the grief cuts in two directions. You grieve the abuse you endured, and you grieve the way it distorted your natural kindness, making you wary of the very quality that once defined your decency. Victimhood superiority doesn't just silence your needs, it rewires your empathy into shame. It punishes you for caring and then leaves you mistrusting the very instinct to care. When entitlement shows up in a relationship, it lands with a particular weight on men because the cultural scripts we inherit already say you are the one who should provide, protect, absorb, and step up. And when these scripts get twisted into entitlement, the abuse doesn't feel like abuse at first. It feels like failing at manhood. This is the hook of the tactic. You're conditioned from boyhood to take responsibility, to carry the load, to prove your worth by giving. So when a partner frames superiority as natural, as their right, you barely question it. You dig in deeper, telling yourself, this is what a good man does. He pays, he endures, he doesn't complain. But the more you give, the less you belong. And that contradiction starts to gnaw at you. One of the clearest ways this plays out is through the language of equality. Most men who fall into this dynamic are not looking for dominance. They're men who value fairness, who believe in equality, who tread carefully not to overpower. You second guess yourself before speaking. You carry extra weight to make sure you're not replicating old patterns. You lean into partnership because you don't want to be that guy. And here's where the exploitation begins. That care, that genuine belief in equality, is used against you. Every time you ask for reciprocity, it's framed as misogyny. Every request for balance is spun as controlling, regressive, or proof that you want a servant. The result is a distortion so deep it corrupts your very values. You believe in equality, but you live in asymmetry. You're carrying both sets of roles, traditional provider and progressive partner, while being told you are still not enough. And the longer it continues, the more it corrodes your belief in equality itself. You start to question the very principles you once stood for. And this is where many men, after abuse, swing into dangerous territory. They leave the relationship so disillusioned that they become vulnerable to extremist voices, online spaces that say, see, equality is a lie. All women are like this. That pendulum swing isn't about hate, it's about despair. It's the fallout of watching your best values weaponized against you. Entitlement also warps your sense of worth as a provider. Many men in these dynamics are still the ones carrying the mortgage, paying the bills, keeping the household afloat, but instead of being recognized as contribution, is reframed as duty. You don't get credit for showing up. You get guilt for not doing even more. You give endlessly money, labor, emotional energy, and in return, you're met with shame, ridicule, or accusations of selfishness. That's where the damage runs deep. Provision without belonging strips you of identity. You start to feel like a function and not a person. Like your only value is in what you deliver, not in who you are. And when you stop meeting every demand, because no man can, you're told you're failing, that you're weak, that you don't measure up. Layered on top of this is cultural reinforcement. In abusive dynamics, superiority is often cloaked in the language of equality. And when you resist, culture often applauds the abuser. You're told, good, men deserve it, even when you never mistreated anyone. That's the part that cuts deepest. You've lived respectfully, you've treated women as equals, you've carried yourself in good faith, and yet you are punished as though you're guilty of the sins of other men. That double wound silences you. At home, your voice is dismissed. You don't understand, you don't get it. In the culture outside, your suffering is mocked or minimized. If you try to explain what's happening, you expect to be ridiculed, called pathetic, weak, laughed at. So you stay quiet, you swallow the shame, and the silence lets the entitlement continue unchecked. The impact on identity is profound. You stop believing you are an equal partner. You start seeing yourself as defective. You carry confusion about why giving is never enough. You carry shame for needing anything in return. And you carry fear that if you ever name what's happening, you'll be dismissed, ridiculed, or punished harder. That's why entitlement is so effective as a tactic. It doesn't just dominate decisions, it reshapes how you see yourself as a man. It tells you that your voice is worthless, your needs are selfish, your worth is conditional, and your resistance is proof of failure. And eventually, you start to believe it. You stop asking, you stop resisting, you disappear into the role they have scripted for you, the provider, the fallback, the one who always steps up but never belongs. Now, let's take a look at 7 different things you can consider doing when you're faced with this type of entitlement and superiority. These tools are not about fixing the abuser or making them suddenly fair, because that's not going to happen. But they are about protecting you. They help you see entitlement for what it is, hold on to your sense of fairness, and stop the shame from embedding itself. Used with care, they can even restore perspective and preserve the part of you that knows that you deserve equality. First is, well, name the entitlement for yourself. When you hear things like, that's your job, you're supposed to take care of me, it's easy to internalize it as failure. Instead, catch it in the moment and label it clearly. This is entitlement, not duty. Even if you can't say the words out loud, saying it in your head keeps the shame from sinking in. Second, set boundaries in neutral terms. Rather than getting pulled into arguments about who's smarter, who knows best, or who works harder, reframe the ground. These are shared responsibilities. I will not carry them alone. You may, and probably will, be ignored, but the act of holding the line reminds you that your needs are legitimate. Third, document the imbalance. Superiority thrives on distortion. You're told you're lazy, selfish, and not pulling your weight. A simple log of finances, housework, or childcare can expose the truth. Not for court, though, to be honest, you might need that later, but for your clarity. When the guilt says, I am not enough, the record will say otherwise. Fourth, and I've said this a number of times, avoid jade. Jade stands for justify, argue, defend, and explain. These four moves are traps. The more you defend yourself, the deeper you sink into their frame. Instead, practice stepping back. Say things like, I've given my view, I'm not debating it further. Don't try to wrestle superiority into fairness, it won't work. Starve it of the fuel it feeds on. 5. Anchor outside perspectives. When you're trapped in this hierarchy, it starts to feel normal. Bring other eyes into your world. Talk to a friend, a mentor, a trauma informed coach like myself. Let someone neutral say the words. That's not equality, that's exploitation. Sometimes one outside perspective is enough to break the illusion. 6. Guard your values from distortion. Entitlement dressed as equality can corrupt your belief in equality itself. You may start to resent the very values you once lived by. Protect yourself here. Remind yourself equality is not the problem, exploitation is. What was weaponized wasn't your weakness, it was your good faith. And lastly, disengage strategically. Not every superiority play deserves your energy. Sometimes the safest response is silence or a firm pause. That doesn't mean you have surrendered. It means you've chosen not to wrestle in a game you probably cannot win. Save your strength for the moments that actually matter. These tools may not shift the relationship. In fact, you may find they provoke anger. That doesn't mean you are failing. It means the entitlement is real. The value of this is not on changing them, it's in protecting you, in breaking the shame, in holding onto fairness, and remembering that partnership is not hierarchy. If you've lived under entitlement and superiority, it can leave you doubting your own worth. Every request you made was twisted into selfishness. Every opinion you held was dismissed as ignorance. Every effort you gave was reframed as not enough. But that story is not the truth. It's a tactic of manipulation and control. Entitlement is not a reflection of your value, it's a distortion of partnership. It works by convincing you that you carry the entire load as your duty, that silence equals maturity, and that their voice is the only one that counts. Here's what you need to remember: you are not failing for wanting fairness, you're not weak for needing support, you're not selfish for expecting reciprocation. You were placed in a hierarchy that should never have existed. And if it felt confusing, that's because you entered it in good faith. You believed in equality, you believed in partnership. Those are strengths, not flaws. The damage of this tactic is real. It can corrupt even your deepest values. It can make you question whether equality itself is a trap, whether fairness is even possible. And that's why naming this as a tactic of manipulation and control matters. Because once you see it for what it is, the tactic of an abuser, not the norm, you can reclaim the right to believe in your own voice and your own values. So if you've been told you are less capable, less wise, less moral, less deserving, let this be the reminder. You never were. You deserve to stand in partnership where your effort, your perspective, and your humanity are equal. And no claim of superiority can take that truth away from you. This is Stand Again, lived experience platform for male survivors of family violence. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Your voice might just help another man find his. If you're looking for one on one support, you can book coaching with a member of the Stand Again team. Simply visit standagain.com.au, where you will also find grounded information on surviving and recovering from family violence as a man. As always, remember that no matter how many times you've been knocked down, you can stand again.